Something is happening with the NBA MVP debate. We all know that this year's race is incredibly close between Giannis, Embiid, and Nikola Jokic, but it feels like this year especially, the debate and the way that we talk about the MVP race has gone in a really negative direction. And today's video is not about this year's MVP race. That can be talked about completely separately another day, but it's got me thinking about past MVP races, how they compare to this one. Have we ever had one this close? Have we ever had one this divisive? And I definitely think that we have, especially now in hindsight, and that is the 2017 NBA MVP race that, in my opinion, completely changed the way that we looked at the MVP, as well as really increased the negativity around the award in the first place. Really quickly though, I want to let you know about the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. With everybody doing their bracket challenges right now, this is a fantastic time to get into PrizePicks. It's one of the best times of the year to be a basketball fan, and right now you can click the link in the description to get a 100% deposit match up to $100 when you use code SPORTING, or you click that link in the description at PrizePicks. Again, you can use code SPORTING, you can click that link for any of your bracket challenge stuff, any NBA stuff right now. It's a fantastic time to get into PrizePicks. Now, if it's your first time, let me explain exactly what PrizePicks is. Essentially, it is you against the numbers. You can take a look behind me and see all of the numbers that they have set for points, assists, rebounds, threes, turnovers, all different kinds of things, whether it be in your bracket challenge, whether it be in the NBA. There are so many different options to continue to take a look at throughout the next couple of weeks and combine some of those things between the NBA and other basketball stuff that's going on. It's an unbelievable time right now to get into this. And basically you select between 2 and 5 players. You select either more or less for each of these numbers that PrizePicks has set. And if you win some cash. And again, you can use that link down in the description. You can use code SPORTING to get that 100% deposit match up to $100. So basically, if you put in $100 and then you use the code to get 100% deposit match, you get $200 to get started on PrizePicks. Go on there, take a look. There's so many different options. One of my favorite things about PrizePicks is there's so many different directions you can go in. And again, you have that special offer as well down in the description. It's a great time to get into it. And thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. So in 2017, we had arguably the closest NBA MVP race in the history of the league. And more importantly to me is it created this debate that has really lingered. It's one of those that you constantly look back on, people constantly talk about and compare to current races, and also talk about the fact that maybe the wrong guy won the award, especially when you look at how their careers have ended up since. Now, there's 3 main characters to discuss here in the MVP race in 2017. The first, of course, is the guy that ultimately won the award, and that is Russell Westbrook. He, in the first year post Kevin Durant, really puts Oklahoma City on his back. I mean, unbelievable statistically, averages a triple-double for the entirety of the season, which ironically he does the following season as well and doesn't win the award. And no disrespect to Russell Westbrook and kind of how his career has fallen off since, he was unbelievable in that season, and he decides to stay in Oklahoma City, and a decision that I think should be celebrated because largely now players want to leave if the situation isn't conducive to winning. He wanted to stay. He wanted to stay in Oklahoma City. It really endeared him to that fan base. And make no mistake about it, he had an unbelievable season that year individually and statistically. The rest of the team was not very good. Of course, after you lose Kevin Durant, it's hard to be a really good team. And the legacy of that MVP award for him is, 1, the statistics, into the team record. It's the worst winning percentage that we've had from an MVP winner in the modern history of the league. They won 47 games. There have been MVPs that won less games, but those are in lockout or suspension shortened seasons. It's the worst winning percentage. They were the 6th seed in the Western Conference, and traditionally the NBA MVP is very closely tied to team record and winning percentage, with a couple of exceptions, one of them being Westbrook, and Westbrook being the biggest exception. There's also this legacy to this season for him that a lot of people connect it to stat padding, right? And while I don't necessarily think there was a ton of that going on in most counting stats, I do definitely believe that there's a lot happening there with the rebound stats specifically. I think Russ cared about averaging a triple-double. I think him averaging a triple-double certainly led a lot towards him winning this award in the first place. And anytime you had the ball as much as Russ did that year, you're going to score a ton of points and you're going to have a ton of assists. I don't think that those things necessarily were negatives for him, but there are a lot of clips that you can go back and look at of, Steven Adams, all these guys boxing out specifically for Russ to get the rebound to average that triple-double. That's neither here nor there, but that's the legacy of the award for Russ is, did the right guy win? Ultimately, the team wasn't that good from a record standpoint. And when people make that argument, the guy they bring up is who came in second place, and that is James Harden. Now, of all the MVPs in the last 10 to 15 years in NBA history, this one is the one that most people go back to and say that the wrong guy won the award for two reasons. One, the team success, the winning percentage stuff that we just talked about with Russ, and how typically that's a big indicator of an MVP. Traditionally, you have to be somewhere within the top 3, maybe top 4 within your own conference in order to win the MVP. And that's where the James Harden Rockets found themselves that year. They won 55 games. They were one of the best offenses in the league. They were one of the best teams in the league overall from a record standpoint. And he had a large part to do with that, obviously. Led the league in assists, was incredible as a scorer as well. And looking back on it now, the efficiency that he brought to the table, the team record, a lot of people, even people that voted for Westbrook at the time, feel like Harden should have won the award. And really, this is kind of a theme that you can connect to current MVP races now, is that a lot of times the narrative and the storyline in the moment of an MVP can become a really, really big deal. So for example, when Derrick Rose won the MVP in 2011, he might not have been the best player in the league that year, but he was the best story. He improved a ton, youngest MVP in league history at the time, and ultimately he ends up winning the award that season. The Westbrook, he stayed when Durant wanted to leave, getting the, averaging the triple-double statistically for an entire season. I think that narrative certainly helped Westbrook win the award that year, when in hindsight, you could certainly make the argument, look back on this award and say that maybe Harden should have won it because of the sheer amount of offensive output and the fact that the team at the end of the day was better. There's an interesting third character to this though, because something we haven't talked about in the entirety of the video to this point is defense and two-way impact. And when you talk about the MVP, the most valuable player, traditionally, that would also mean that the guy would guard some. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that MVPs in the past have played great defense. I would argue that that's almost never been the case, with a couple of exceptions, especially in the early to mid 2000s. However, Kawhi Leonard was certainly a player in this, and plenty of smart basketball people, Zach Lowe included, voted for Kawhi Leonard in this season, despite the crazy statistics of Russ, despite how incredible of an offensive player Harden was that year. This was the breakout year for Kawhi post the Tim Duncan era. They had one of the best records in the league. They won like 61 games, and Kawhi was incredible on both ends of the floor. 25 point per game score. He wasn't creating as much offense as Harden. He didn't have the gaudy statistics that Russ did, but his team won a ton of games, and he played on both ends of the floor as well. And there are some people that will still make the argument to this day that in fact Kawhi Leonard should have won the MVP that year. And that brings me to really the point of this entire video. It's kind of similar to this year, right? You can make an argument for every single guy. I see Kawhi as kind of the Giannis in this scenario, the guy that plays on both ends of the floor, the guy that is just an incredible all-around player. And then I see Embiid in kind of the Harden mold, a guy that hasn't won it, that people really want to see win it, that isn't necessarily seen as the favorite, but overall offensively is unbelievable. The difference here being, of course, Embiid plays defense. And then I see Russ in the Jokic mold a little bit here in terms of the statistics. For Russ, it's the traditional stats. It's averaging a triple-double. For Jokic, it's the advanced stats. It's how incredible he is as an offensive player. And the point of this video more so is to say every single guy in that 2017 season earned the award. They deserve to win it, but only one guy can. And that's also the theme of the award this year as well. Giannis, Embiid, Jokic, whoever you want to vote for, I don't think there's a wrong answer. And in 2017, I don't think there was a wrong answer either. I think in the moment, if you would ask me if I had a vote, I probably would have voted for Russ just because of the incredible statistical accomplishment that is averaging a triple-double in the entirety of the season. But now looking back on it, I probably would have voted for James Harden just because at a certain point, your team record almost disqualifies you from the MVP discussion. And despite the fact that Oklahoma City team obviously wasn't very good, Russ was very, very close. And in my opinion, now in hindsight, over that line in terms of overall team success in what you need to accomplish as a bare minimum threshold to be really heavily considered in the MVP conversation. And this is just such an interesting race, in my opinion, to look back on now, because it not only gives us insight into the race this year, but also is one of those few that throughout the history of the league you can look back on and really make a strong case for multiple players, other than the guy that actually won it, to actually won the award. Typically, when you look throughout the history of the league, there is mostly a consensus by the time the season is over. And that is one that I would argue for the rest of the history of the league will always be contentious, will always be contended over and divisive in terms of who should have won it. In hindsight, I probably would have picked Harden now, but at the time I would have picked Russ, and I think narratives had a lot to do with that. But what I want to know is who you guys would have voted for in 2017 now, today, all these years later, with time to think about it. Maybe you weren't as into the NBA at the time, but now you are. Who would you have voted for in the 2017 MVP race now compared to maybe who you would have voted for then? Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see y'all next time.